With the name like LUZZ, can this paddle be any good? Welcome back to Pickleball Paddle Reviews, and today we're doing a 10-hour review on this, the Pro Archer 2 by LUZZ. They sent me out this paddle for free to test it out, but they had no input on any of the opinions I have about this paddle. So a brief intro on LUZZ. I had no idea who they were, but they looks like they're a pretty okay established, probably smaller side of brands that make pickleball paddles. They do have some sponsored athletes in the pro level scene, so that was quite interesting to see. This was one of their paddles that were most recently made and USPA approved. They actually sent me this quite a while ago, maybe 2 to 3 months ago, but it wasn't quite approved yet, so they did not want me to make a review until it was. Just so that you guys, the consumer, would be able to get this paddle right away and know that it was legal. Now, LUZZ is probably not a household name in any way. You probably don't know too much about them. Probably the only thing I knew about them was when they had released their Cannon paddle. It actually got banned and got almost all of their paddles banned at the time because of some sort of mix-up they had with the one that they had submitted and the one that was actually approved. So they had gotten to some deep water with USPA getting all of their paddles removed from their list, but it looks like they're slowly building up that relationship again and getting their paddles back on. Now, let's go with the paddle really quickly. My first impressions of the paddle was that it kind of reminded me of a Yola, especially the 3 series in design, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I really like the color scheme, the pink to the purple. It's a little girly, but I really think it looks pretty good. Felt pretty good in hand, pretty well balanced. I would say the balance point on this paddle felt a little lower, which is a little surprising, and playing with it, it also was a little surprising that the sweet spot felt kind of pulled down a little bit rather than the typical spot where everybody knows and loves. Now, this is marketed as a Gen 3 paddle, so it has the honeycomb core with the foam around the edge. LUZZ has a lot of their stats on their site, which I will put up on the screen right now. I don't necessarily think that it performs quite as powerfully, I guess, as other Gen 3 paddles. Not necessarily a bad thing. It's a little bit easier to control and shape the ball with this paddle. The grit is really crazy, honestly, and you could shape the ball very well. I felt like I was getting a lot of crazy spins and looks whenever I was trying to hit heavy topspin. But other than that, that actually is quite typical for some of these Chinese brands that need some sort of marketing or extra oomph in their paddles, so they add extra grit to their surface or face so that they can say that they have some crazy spin. And for the Pro Archer 2, that's no different. It actually does have some crazy spin, and it's held up pretty well. I've been playing with it on and off for the last 2 months, and I've definitely spent a little more than 10 hours with it at this point, and I'm quite comfortable knowing that, like, yeah, this doesn't have that punch and power of the traditional Gen 3 paddles that I've played with, but it does provide enough power and gives you more options at that shaping and controlling that ball. All right. For some of the issues I had with the paddle was the stability. Even though it's so bottom heavy feeling and the sweet spot felt so low, I still added some tape to the bottom at first, some weighted tape, just my typical setup, and I immediately added an overgrip because it felt just a little small in my hands, and because of that stability issue, it just felt extra pronounced because there was just not enough of a grip for me to handle. Two-handed backhands felt okay. The grip is plenty long enough to do a two-handed backhand. It's not the biggest, so it's definitely not going to be something like the SLK era where you have a 5.5-inch handle, but it's definitely long enough. I will say that adding that weight did bring down that sweet spot even more. So as you can see, I've been slowly ripping off some weight at a time. This is actually a silicone weight, which is easier to tear. So if anybody wants to check out the silicone weight that I've been trying, I'll link those down below so that you guys can take a look at that. Just because I think it's a nice way to just add some weight, and then as you're playing, if you notice that it's a little too heavy, it's just really easy to pull off and tear. And yeah, it's actually quite nice to be able to do that on a paddle. All right, so for ground strokes like drives and backhands, it feels really good. It doesn't necessarily have the power of the traditional Gen 3s that I was expecting, so I wanted more pop, but it was still good once you got used to that sweet spot also being low. Another good thing about what it was, I felt like I was getting a lot of topspin, and I was really able to shape shots down the line, cross court, anywhere that I wanted to hit it. It was quite easy to do so. Once I got used to that sweet spot. Like, once again, I really have to iterate. Once you get used to the sweet spot being a little lower, it's much easier to play with this paddle. Some of the cons about this paddle for ground strokes is that it lacks that pop, so you don't get that satisfying punch feeling when you're doing ground strokes. Even though it's moving plenty fast enough, it feels like you really have to use a little bit of extra energy, and that could knock you off balance every so often. And because of that, it kind of feels like you really have to know what you're doing when you're playing with this paddle. Like, it's not intuitive enough because that pop is missing. It might be because I've been playing with so many Gen 3 or 4 paddles now, 3.5, whatever. Those paddles just feel a little poppier and have a little bit more punch in them. And also the power curve on this didn't feel very linear, meaning that if you swung harder, it would go faster, but not at a linear rate. Like, up to a certain point, it would kind of decrease how much speed you were gaining, even though you're inputting more power. Now, for the soft game, like dinks, resets, and drops, I felt like this was an excellent paddle for that. The grit on this was really good for shaping the ball. It felt very natural to come up with the ball and hit drops. It was very easy to aim them as well. And the paddle face is big enough to where the sweet spot felt decent. Once again, for the third time, once you get used to the sweet spot being weirdly lower than other paddles. Another thing I really liked about this was the touch. It felt like this paddle had very good touch. You could really depend on it when you're hitting soft shots. It didn't have the same inconsistency on ground strokes, where I felt like sometimes I would be hitting it a lot harder and it wouldn't be going as fast. It felt very natural in that soft game range where you're mostly hitting very touch shots and lighter shots. Of course, when you're hitting like flicks and more powerful shots, sometimes it did come back up as inconsistent, but it was plenty more consistent than I thought it was going to be at the soft game, and it was actually very fun. One of the more fun paddles that I've played with for soft game stuff. And I was kind of surprised because a lot of these Chinese clone paddles are mainly power paddles that are fun for poppiness, and this was actually more muted and plush to be playing the soft game. Now let's also talk about volleys and resets, because this is one of the things I think this is sometimes great and sometimes kind of terrible. So when I was playing for volleys, it felt great. Like, flicks felt really good. I was doing a lot of flicks and blocks as well as counters. This was great for counters, especially if you're anticipating well and getting the paddle into position. It felt like there was plenty of power for putaways and overheads. But every now and then, I'd also run into like a dead put away, which is so weird. It could be because I was still hitting this top area, but I felt like if you swung hard enough on a put away, you should know that the ball is going fast and going away. But it did not feel like that on this. Just so it might just be something I need to get used to, but did not have a satisfying feeling because of that. Now, one of the big strengths of this paddle is resets. I felt resets were very good on this, especially at the net. Whenever I was attacked on, I was able to slow down the ball very easily. It felt very natural on this, surprisingly. It kind of absorbed that impact very well and would deflect it so slow that I was kind of like, wow, this is quite amazing that it could catch that and slow down the ball so much. Not quite sure what kind of technology or construction is in here to do that, but it felt the most natural out of almost all of the paddles I've used to hit resets. Very close to the SLK era wide body, actually, being so good at doing resets. So the Pro2 series of the Archer starts at $189.99, which is at the upper end of premium like Chinese paddles, I think, or Chinese manufactured paddles that aren't the main brands. But I think for the user that's looking for maybe stepping up to a premium paddle, but getting something that isn't exactly a power paddle, I don't know. This is pretty close to an SLK era in terms of usability, but it doesn't have the fun pop to it like those paddles. It's somewhat of a conundrum in my head. Like, do I really like this paddle, or is there not enough pop to really use it competitively? I really can't tell and haven't really had a conclusion there yet. I think I will have to play with this paddle a little bit more. I am worried about a few things, like does this carbon fiber face last long enough so that it can be used over an extended period and still have that reliable spin? And I'm also worried that, like, is the construction really good on this? Because it feels very stable when you hit on the face. Like, it does not feel like any of this is losing any of its stability, and it's not like squishing in at all anywhere, where some paddles, when they break in, you'll definitely tell that it's starting to break in and squish in. This paddle has not at all, and I've put definitely over 10 hours on this. So all in all, I think this paddle is good, not great. But if you do want to check out this paddle, I'll have it linked down below to this paddle. Also, they gave me a code, PBR15, for 15% off the paddle. So it does make it a little bit more affordable, around that 160 mark. So I would say at that price range, it's not that bad. I would probably put the SLK era and this in my cart and try to decide, like, does this do enough to kind of offset that pop that you get with the SLK era. The SLK era, I feel, is such great value because you get that really strong Gen 3 pop. But this you get less of that pop, but you get increased control and spinability on the ball. And that might be a okay sacrifice if you're looking at that. All right, so if you've ever tried this paddle, please comment down below if you think it's great or not. I would love to hear other people's opinions about their interactions with LUZZ, and I would love to hear if anybody else has tried any of their paddles, because they do have quite a few paddles, and they're re-releasing their Cannon paddle, which was banned before for being too powerful. So I want to see if anybody thinks that it's actually more fun now with their now legal Cannon paddle. Make sure to like and subscribe on this video if you like this kind of content. We'll be making more reviews about pickleball paddles as well as some of the gear now. So very soon we'll be doing some reviews on gear. Very excited because I used to be a huge gearhead and actually started my first YouTube channel talking about gear like backpacks and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to start doing that as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and thank you, LUZZ, for sending this paddle out. Peace.